I'm Lee Blonder, the University Senate Council Chair, and I'd like to welcome you to this special meeting of the University Senate that was called by President Capilouto. I want to begin with a reminder that all University Senate meetings, including this one, are conducted in compliance with Kentucky Open Meetings Law and follow parliamentary procedure established in the University Senate rules. Sheila Brothers, Office of the Senate Counsel, is taking minutes, and our Michelle Soner, who's out there, she's our Sergeant at Arms, and J.S. Butler is our parliamentarian. Before we get started, I want to review the agenda for today's meeting. President Capilouto called this meeting of the University Senate to address the Senate Council memo of October 4th and the University Senate resolution of October 8th. The Senate Council memo describes feedback from faculty on the first and anticipated second round of budget cuts and makes several recommendations. The University Senate resolution states that the University Senate endorses the recommendations contained in the Senate Council memo of October 4th to President Capilouto and requests that the President, in the spirit of shared governance, respond to each recommendation. Further, the University Senate asks that the President report to it on the actions taken to implement or his rationale for not implementing each of the recommendations. The recommendations endorsed in the Senate resolution include the following. Number one, halt the second round of budget cuts to academic units. Number two, consult with an advisory committee selected by the Senate Council to provide viable, informed, and mutually acceptable budgetary guidelines for future decisions as they impact the teaching, research, and service missions of this university. Number three, promote mutual respect and human dignity and diversity and inclusion in all future personnel actions. Number four, direct that in the spirit of shared sacrifice, the highest paid administrators take salary cuts. Number five, eliminate the current practice in which the university contributes the entire 15% of the annual retirement benefit for select executives. And number six, provide a point-by-point response to faculty, staff, and students regarding the concerns expressed in the memo. Having summarized the agenda for today's meeting, I will turn the floor over to President Capilouto. The President will first give a presentation, and then he will moderate the discussion and take questions from the floor. Senators will be given preference. However, the President hopes to answer all questions if time permits. Please remember to silence your electronic devices, raise your hand, wait to be called on by the President, and state your name and affiliation before speaking. Student government ushers will provide microphones to speakers. They will also supply paper so that attendees can submit questions anonymously. The President is also taking questions electronically through his email and Twitter accounts. And this meeting is being videotaped and live streamed through UK Now. I want to extend my thanks to everyone who worked very hard to make this meeting possible, and I now turn the floor over to President Capilouto.
Thank you, Lee Blonder, and thank all of you for being here today. I want to start off with something very simple to me, and that is I am on your side, and we are in this together, and today I'm going to try to explain why. I never pretended to have all the answers or really to know all of the questions. And in fact, the process we chose to go through this year was to invite your input and feedback. This is what universities are about. I know many people are here today because you think the biggest problem you have is me. And I want to tell you that the forces we face are much bigger than me, or much bigger than you. But I want to share with you what I have discovered since my arrival here. This is a vision that you have created, and that this university is a first choice for the best and brightest students, and for those students who want to be the best and brightest when they leave. It is a first choice for research, and there are many ways to measure this, and I recognize all the forms of creativity we have here at the University of Kentucky. But one simple measure is the amount of funded research across all the universities in the state of Kentucky, and across federal, state and local, and industry research. We're well over 60% of all that is done here. And then when it comes to service, which uplifts me from every county that I visit and extension center, when I visit the Salvation Army home for the homeless here and see our fingerprints on everything, when I see our hospital now able to provide tertiary and quaternary, high-touch and high-tech care to anybody in Kentucky, to give them that peace of mind that regardless of how ill you may be, you can get care in your own backyard. That is a vision that you created and that I respect. Now, those forces we face. This is just a summary, but I'll start on the left. First of all, the citizen demand for accountability. And it's getting down to a resource level. Next door in Tennessee, it's the first state to take its entire higher education budget and allocate it according to performance measures. 16 other states are considering similar approaches, including Kentucky. Our state and federal funding looks flat or declining over the next few years, and I'll elaborate on that. Access concerns, and I'm not talking about just financial access. I'm talking about access of the non-traditional student to complete his or her degree, and access for the student on campus to the classes they need to progress. We have opportunities because people want the high-skill competencies that we can provide that will lead job growth in this country. And then there's a great demand that we temper these increases we've had in tuition and fees over the last decade. What are the competitive pressures? If you look on the right here, governors launching university alternatives. You've heard of the Western Governors Association, certainly a fully online consortium of degrees. Here in Kentucky, the Council on Post-Secondary Education is spending $400,000 this year and plans to spend $4 million next year on Commonwealth University. This is to meet the need of those who did not complete their undergraduate degrees who are all over the state. So that's underway. You've all heard about these venture capitalists now, edX, that involves MIT and Harvard and the University of Texas system, investing large sums of money for a yet not fully understood system of online learning referred to as MOOCs. And then we have pressures from above, from those elites that compete for our students, and pressures from below of those who are looking for a lower cost alternative to those first years of college. So a little bit about our state funding. I know you have all lived through this, and excuse me for reviewing it, but it's important. All right, so we peaked at $303 million, started in 01-02 fiscal year 303, and then we progressed to $280 million. You know, our state passes two-year budgets. And I want you to look at these red dots throughout here, because despite the fact that we passed two-year budgets, we have had 7 second-year cuts out of 9 reflected here. It's got to always anticipate what happens in the next year. The next thing I want to point out to you is this section right here. Okay? So we hit the recession here, and this money that propped up our funding was stimulus money that came from the federal government through the states. Everybody expected that our recession would not be that long and deep, and that the funds would bounce back in the form of state revenues. Well, they didn't. Okay? So once the stimulus funds evaporated and some other state funds decreased, we're down to $284 million. What did we do during this period? I think in some ways we positioned ourselves for a bright future. We grew our faculty by 9%, instructional faculty. We grew our administration by 6%, and our staff by 2%. That's what we did during this period. And I can't be too optimistic about these monies returning, because you read the papers like I do. States face pressures in pensions, health care, health benefits for their employees, Medicaid, the justice system, and so forth. So what about at the federal level, these research funds that we depend upon? So here was the doubling of, I am going to talk about technology, but I wasn't planning on it now. Can you move that back? There you go. Okay. Thank you. So we had the doubling of NIH, expansion of research in the United States. It flattens out. A peak with stimulus dollars, where we did quite well as a university. We got more than our share. And then what do we face? If we continue under the Budget Control Act, it'll be flat. If we have sequestration in January, it'll go to this amount. And if we include in that non-defense and discretionary funding, if we don't include that, this research funded nationally could go from $60 to $50 million. What would that mean to the share of the University of Kentucky? Roughly off the top of my head, $25 million. So then another force we face, this technology-infused learning. I see Ted Shotsky here, and Ted and I had a conversation Friday night. He told me that his 10 and 14-year-old are already experienced this flipped classroom. I found a prize student at Woodford County High School in an advanced chemistry course, and he too, along with all of his fellow classmates, was in a flipped classroom where they did much sort of learning in advance, some online before they got there, and then the classroom was flipped where the professor engaged them in the application of what they learned. If you read in the Chronicle last week, San Jose State University had dismal rates of success in their energy, electronics, and circuits course. So what did they do? They got the lectures. They worked with MIT and Harvard. They got the lectures free from edX, that new enterprise. The videotape lectures came, and they flipped the classroom using their professors to engage in that way. Their success improved. Now, I don't mean to tell you that is the future. I mean to tell you I'm not sure what all that means. But I think we should be having a conversation about it. All right, and this competition that's growing for online learning. I've had several meetings with staff groups, and I think Mike Adams will attest that every time I have one, I have somebody raise their hand and tell me about the online degree that they completed at a university around our state. So I ask, what is the credit hour production for online learning across the state of Kentucky? And you can see that many universities are heavy into this. Louisville and Kentucky towards this end of the spectrum. Again, what does that mean for our future? I think this comment by the recently named president at MIT, Raphael Reif, really sums it up. Online education holds the key to making residential education better and less expensive, even as it promises to offer education to many millions more people. And the quality of purely online education will depend on the residential education from which it stems. I think these are going to leverage each other. I think that those residential campuses that invite the best and brightest and prepare people to be the best and brightest, those top residential campuses will be the ones that thrive and strive versus those that survive and struggle. And I know that we can be that kind of university. So a little bit about our planning. The year I arrived, I literally met with thousands of people. We looked at all kinds of data. We named a university review committee, and I was overwhelmed by what I learned. I told people often people were doing so many good things here. It was my responsibility to learn even more about how we could go forward. This culminated in a board retreat looking at the university-wide committee recommendations, and the first priority was undergraduate education. That has been our focus, and I'll elaborate on that throughout the next 30 minutes. We said that we were going to expand the student quality, academic programming, opportunities for more Kentuckians and students from the surrounding states. Kentucky is one of those no-growth states when it comes to high school graduates. No growth. There are only 3 in the South that really grow, and that is Florida, Georgia, and North Carolina. So we're in that no-growth state. Another reason that people wanted to focus on undergraduate education was this. The top line here is our first to second year retention. And we did a good job at elevating this. Now we've plateaued. And when you look closely at what happens in those second, third, and fourth years, in fact, we've worsened. And our graduation rates are not moving. They're stalled at 59%. And universities with similar student and faculty profiles are moving these numbers. We've been committed to this, and I want us to work together to be even more successful. What are some of the indicators we ask? Areas for improvement. This was selected themes from the sophomore attrition survey and areas for improvement from the graduating senior survey. We asked these students, if you didn't graduate in 4 years, tell us why. And so look at some of the things that come here that are very important to us. Academic advising, major selection, you see this, change major, lost of credit, work conflicted with class, access to competitive majors, course availability, tuition and costs was the least frequently thing mentioned on that graduating senior survey. A second priority, infrastructure. You people have done remarkable things in the facilities that we have, but we are not going to be able to compete with what we have in place now. An independent study looked and showed that we have the most deferred maintenance of any university in the state. We have more space that's not accessible to those without disabilities. Average age 50 years. Our residence halls, we had 600 modern beds. 85% of our freshmen applied to live in those residence hall beds and were willing to pay a higher price. This is why infrastructure was indicated as a priority. Then access and affordability. People shared that they thought this increase in tuition and fees was unsustainable, that we were on a trajectory that pinched families at the same time that they were facing the woes of an economic downturn. And lastly, work life and environment. There were several things, but the biggest one that came up was compensation of our most precious resource. These are comparisons to peers that were selected by the university-wide committee last year. Here we're down on the end. We're on the wrong side of these averages. And if you look around, look back to Tennessee again on the second year of a 5% salary plan. We have a fighting fund here on campus that people would come to the office of the provost some 300 times over the last few years to ask for funds to retain people. Well, I'd like us to be a little more proactive. I don't like that we have to make use this so frequently. I want us to stay ahead of this. Technology. Except, I just can't. Where should I point this clicker? Maybe I need some direction here. Is that way? Is that where? Okay, thank you. How's that? All right. A little bit about the planning that we went through last year and what we're trying to improve this year. So, we waited for the General Assembly and the governor. They finally approved the budget. CPE adopted their tuition parameters. And then we asked the academic and administrative units. We gave them parameters and targets and told them to work on those. The units submitted their reallocation plans. Some of those were adjusted. And then we took a tuition plan to the Board of Trustees and really enacted our budget. So we had a 6% state budget cut. We asked units to work, academic units and our extension centers throughout 120 counties, to work on a 3.3% budget reduction, and our administrative units at over 5%. That was the target, and we made some adjustments. So what about this year? So here's the process we're in. And this is really out of respect for you. I said last year we compressed so much into a short amount of time at the end of the year. I know the conversations might be difficult, but when everybody returns to campus, let's start the conversation. So we met with the provost, and I continue to meet with all the colleges. The provost is going to go through a series of meetings with the units. We'll follow up with meetings. We'll reassess all of this in November, and I will report to the Board of Trustees and you and the deans about what we've seen, what we found, what we've concluded, and I'm happy to come back and do so. I understand all of your angst about this, but I ultimately trust you to help us make a better informed and well-reasoned set of decisions about all of this. So I don't really have to say this, but I need to let you know that First Amendment rights are alive and well at the University of Kentucky. People have been quite open and honest about some of the things that they would like to say. I'm not going to read all of these, but I've heard everything from our GAs and TAs are essential for work and stipends are too low. It's going to undermine our research. We need cost of living raises for the lowest paid, forego raises to save jobs. We have gender inequality in pay. Our IP commercialization shops aren't working properly. Our libraries have been hit and don't need to be cut anymore. We're unsure about the data you use to make administrative decisions. I am not offended by any of this. I welcome it. That's why, and this is how you define a university. So your themes that I would like to review, and take these one by one. First, the question about a vision. I want to return to what I said earlier. This past year reminds me that we are the first choice for the best and brightest, and people questioned that when I got here. And I still believe, when I see what we do in our living learning communities, that those who are at that mid-range or those who are first-generation students, we're working for them to be the best and brightest when they leave. Experts will tell you that universities cannot grow in size, quality, or diversity. We did all of that this year in this entering class. Our National Merit Awards went from 29 to 71. Those who are in that same category in terms of numbers last year included Duke, Dartmouth, Cal Berkeley, University of Illinois, Cornell, Ohio State. When I go to cities like Chicago and where we have overflow audiences, these things reflect so positively on our university and do help us recruit an outstanding class. I believe your memo stated that we admitted more and more unqualified students. That is simply not the case. Our interquartile range for ACT students is 23 to 28. Last year, the peers we looked at, including universities like Iowa and Missouri, which Missouri's an AAU university, that is their range in terms of their ACT scores. So I think we have a terrific class. And then that business about the residential halls. There we go. Okay, so a year from this August, we'll have 2,918 new residence hall beds on this campus. But they're not just places for people to live. We have over 60,000 square feet of learning space in this that could potentially include 126 classroom study rooms or multi-purpose rooms. A total of the 60,000 square feet. And the important thing, we know that those students that live on campus have a better chance of succeeding. The other thing that was so important is the unique way we did this. This is 100% funded with private equity. It's a publicly traded firm that has choices about where to invest. They chose the University of Kentucky to be their showcase. They believe we have what it takes to be that residential campus, a model for those across the United States. They've invested in our university. It's going to translate certainly into good things on our campus, but over 3,000 jobs in the next few years. Okay, I want to start with the bottom bullet here. We commissioned assessment of our debt and our financial strength. Currently, our debt level is 3.7%. That means our debt that we pay, just like the mortgage on your house, is 3.7% of our gross revenues. We have a plan to borrow $200 million. If we were to do so, that would increase that to 4.1%. The state of Kentucky uses as a benchmark for the state 6%. We're well underneath that. We borrowed heavily over the past few years to invest in a hospital. Many people thought that that entirely evaporated our debt capacity. In fact, it grew it in terms of our revenues. So we have that strength to start investing in our campus. But not just that we borrow and invest $200 million, I'm committed to raising $200 million in philanthropy. I attended the Board of Advisors meeting for the College of Business and Economics last year. Everybody wanted to know, was I going to make them the number one college on the list to get funds from the state? And I told them what I've told you earlier. That's not going to happen. They're not funds from the state. And after we had a heart-to-heart talk, one gentleman stood up and said, looked at everybody in the room and said, all of us here have to commit to either contribute or raise $3 million. That's how we're going to do a $65 million project. We have such confidence in the progress we made. We went to the board at our last meeting, secured from them the permission to hire an architect. So I'm excited about that project. I also want to tell you that a plan to house all of our voice faculty into the opera building had languished. Well, we solved that problem. I talked to Michael Tick this afternoon and Everett McCorvey, and that's going to happen. That's going to happen. And I also want to say that these other spaces that trouble me deeply, and this one, maybe it's because I look at it every day when I wake up, is that Kim Fizz building. Okay? We have 3,000 to 4,000 students that enter that building every week. It's the second most utilized building on this campus. It is not a place where that modern learning can take place or discovery can take place. And I am committed to getting that building replaced. And I'm going to ask the provost to set up a group next week, because I'm confident we can get there, that we start looking at the plans for replacing that building. And we've got to infuse that technology in that building. We've got to have that modern learning that we all know is going to be demanded by our students. It's every fourth click. There we go. Okay, so I wanted to give you this little framework and give you some, what I hope is encouraging news. So, what can't we change? I've told you about this stubbornness in state revenues, federal support, and our endowments are a victim of a slow market right now. Harvard and Kentucky reported negative returns for this last year, right, Angie? It's the way it was. It's the way the market went. One of the things we can change, and I'll elaborate on, is net tuition revenue. How do we do it? The mix of students, in-state non-residents, transfer students, the size of the class, the retention rates, and the scholarship distribution, how much we spend on those things. Our preliminary numbers in terms of the net tuition revenue are trending positive. Why? We've had enrollment growth. We grew the number of Kentucky students. Our non-resident revenue looks like, and we're still scrubbing these, went from 25% to 31%. And when I'm out there recruiting with a terrific enrollment management team, you learn that so many of these non-residents have Kentucky ties. You know, their grandparents or their uncle had a great experience here, and that's why they want to come to Kentucky. This year alone, we had a 47% increase in the number of legacy scholarships. These are people who live out of state and their parents went to Kentucky. So we have terrific things going on in that area. And I am confident that our provost is going to have flexibility to deal with all the pressure points that we're identifying. In the memo that I received, how did you do that? I'm sensitive to the concerns expressed in the quote, "We're dramatically increasing the student-faculty ratio." So we took a look at this. I looked at this when I first arrived. These are the top 10 publicly ranked universities, the 2013 edition of U.S. News and World Report. I decided just to list the top 10. You can see that we're in the ballpark. 5 out of 10 of those have a 17-to-1 ratio. Ours is 17.5-to-1. I'm sure U.S. News rounds that up to 18. But what our challenge is do we have our resources properly distributed? You have let me know this loud and clear. Questions about the amount we teach, the amount taught by TAs and part-times, the advising loads, the time devoted to research, the funded research, all those questions that you have raised, that's our challenge, to take that information and that you've provided to make sure we're addressing these pressure points and that we can grow smartly. Also, the memo stated that we're growing undergraduate education at the expense of graduate education and research. So first of all, I don't ever want to pit all our sort of mission components against one another, but with this slide I want to sort of share with you how it is interrelated. So on the left side, this is the student credit hour generation. So undergraduates, 568,000 credit hours. Graduate education, 155,000. And the reason this jumped up here is to let you know we use IPED's definitions. They said starting in that year you have to include professional students. Okay, so that's why it jumped up. But when I report these revenue figures here, this does not include professional students. So if you look here, we have $206 million of total revenue, 168 is net revenue. That means we spent $37.6 million on scholarships. That means we netted 81.3%. How does that compare with other universities? This is your sort of discount rate. What do you bring in over and above your scholarships? We do better than the average, which is about 77%. We're at 81.3%. When it comes to graduate education, $55 million. The net revenue is 35.5. The return is 64%. And that doesn't entirely reflect the picture, because I know graduate students teach. I know that there's another component of funds that we attract through research to fund graduate students. But I wanted to share with you that, these are the dynamics we work with, and doing things correctly in undergraduate education can facilitate what we're doing in graduate education. And then research. Right? To conduct research costs money. In fact, there's an overhead rate paid by the federal government. They come in and audit your operations, your facilities, your administrative support at different levels and all. Right? The amount of overhead we have here is $95 million. Okay? On the bottom, this is how much we get reimbursed from the feds. This is how much from our other grants, state and industry awards. The University of Kentucky, to support all this, contributes $42 million of the $95 million. And where does the $42 million come from? There are really two sources. State dollars that are shrinking and tuition and fee dollars. So just to share how these are interrelated, and I don't want us to think that we're focusing on undergraduate education at the expense of these other missions, but it's to facilitate our opportunities in those other missions. The next question I received said, scholarship and financial aid distribution. We're directing an ever-increasing part of our budget to scholarships irrespective of need. A little picture of our scholarships. So we began investing in scholarships, certainly before I arrived, and then it jumped this past year. And why? Two reasons. There was about $10 million that was a result of all the commitments we had already made. We'd had about 3 years of awarding scholarships. Students stay for the second, third, and fourth year. I did make the decision, take full responsibility for this part, $2.2 million. When I arrived and I saw there were so many top-notch students who we were saying no to, who were choosing to go to other universities, choosing to go out of state. And I said, we've got to address that immediately. And we did. And yes, later in the year, athletics covered that amount. But I want to let you know that we had made these commitments. It was difficult to pull back on them. And then in terms of not looking at need, I salute all of those who came before me. Because over on the right side here is our growth in our Parker scholarships. This is for diversity, which is defined broadly here. It's defined on race and financial circumstance and region. We grew this from about $3 million to nearly $8 million over the last few years. And it shows in the most diverse class we've ever had here at the University of Kentucky. Now, this does not include, in a moment, the athletic scholarships that are paid for by athletics for the student athletes. But this is the $57 million we spend on graduate and undergraduate scholarships. My man. Thank you. You got the touch. Okay. And back to, have we awarded scholarships in accord to need? So this breaks down by family income into 4 groups: the lowest average, low mid, mid high, high family income. This is amount of out-of-pocket cost these families would have on average after they expend the grants and scholarships. These are things you do not have to pay back. You do not have to pay these monies back. These are not loans. And you can see those with the lowest income really have net return. They do have other expenses at college, but I hope you'll appreciate that those who certainly came before me, and I support it, were paying attention to need. University libraries. We certainly heard this loud and clear, the provost and I. We have 55,000 periodicals we support. The library is also using their endowment revenues to modernize certain spaces for the QEP and other innovations in learning we have underway. And maintaining those periodicals is a top priority for us as we go forward. You also asked about athletics and their contributions to our budget. Let me say that the oversight of athletics comes under the Board of Trustees in new ways now. There is a consolidated athletics budget that is presented to the board. It was this past Sunday again as well. So this is really out of their budget from last year, but I want to give you some picture of what intercollegiate athletics does here. It's one of about a dozen programs in this country that is self-sustaining. All right? So what monies flow to the university? As a service assessment, that's the overhead for the services we provide to them in payroll and HR and so forth. The scholarships for non-athletes, this was the awards I mentioned earlier, and they've been contributing before. For their student athletes, nearly $12 million in scholarships. Right? There's royalty income. This is a budgeted amount. It's up this year after certainly a national championship. And then there are awards to the band grant. So a little picture about athletics. There are lessons in this for academic programs too. I mean, look, there are two programs, football and men's basketball, that have positive net revenue. Okay? There are 133 student athletes on scholarships there. These revenues make it possible to fund 20 different sports that add to gender and color diversity on our campus. All right? In terms of athletics, it's real important that they maintain a sort of positive revenue. But with Athletic Director Barnhart, it's never been a question of if they're going to help. It's going to be how much. And we continue those discussions. Two other matters. UK Healthcare. It was raised in here that there were concerns that we could not service the debt of our hospital. I would only point you to the debt capacity study that was done. It is on the website. It's been there for about 90 days, and we can certainly answer questions about that. And then the future budget model. We are looking for a way to be more transparent, to reward people for creativity and entrepreneurship, to be fair in the assignment of costs, and to respect so many principles like interdisciplinary work and other values that you've expressed. We're going to work through that. But one of the things I would, and I don't know exactly what it's going to look like, but one of the things I do not want to do is put all this back in a black box. And lastly, that I've worked to create a false crisis, and I wish that were true because that doesn't make it. I don't like what's happening any more than you. Some days I have disappointment in my fellow citizens that we worked so hard to bail out a bank, but maybe we may lose a generation in the process. But facing those realities and looking for ways to earn our way forward, I think, are all within our grasp. Two more things to cover. Your recommendations. First, to halt the second round of budget cuts to academic units. I cannot halt these discussions. Too much is being revealed, and we've got to find a more informed and better decision. As we go forward, I'll report to you, our deans, our board of trustees. Next, consult with an advisory committee selected by the Senate Council, so forth. We have two committees that exist now that look at these matters. The Provost Council on Metrics. It's made up of chairs, deans, center directors, and faculty. And we have a Financial Model Implementation Committee, again made up of deans, chairs, faculty, and staff. I will invite Mike Adams and Lee Blonder to add additional persons to both of those committees, and we'll broaden what they look at to make sure we include these. The issue about values, these are certainly ones that I hold true to both personally, and I know you do as well. Mutual respect and human dignity and diversity and inclusion, and I want to hear more from you. Next, direct that in the spirit of shared sacrifice, the highest paid administrators take salary cuts. For example, University of California, Riverside. I did watch California closely during the recession. They were one of the states that led in salary cuts and furloughs. I never thought that was a good approach. In terms of top administrators, most of whom were appointed before I got here, they took these jobs and didn't consider other jobs. There were letters of appointments made to them, and I think it's fair to respect them. The next point about the contribution. This is an AR here. I was unfamiliar with it when I arrived. It was unknown to me when a contract was presented to me that mine was different than anybody else's. But it is the case, and it's been in existence for years, that this 15% of the annual retirement benefit was paid for select executives. I discontinued that practice beginning with this fiscal year. Don't plan to continue it. Again, I don't think it is the right thing to go back and change someone's letter of appointment. They accepted the job under those circumstances. I invite the Senate chair and the chair of the staff Senate to certainly meet with the Board of Trustees in terms of, at least the chair of the board, that it involves my compensation. I'll respect any discussions and any decisions made about that. Lastly, I want to talk to you just a moment about what our Board of Trustees asked for us to do in engaging our entire campus in a set of items that they think are vital for our future. And I'll let you read these. Undergraduate education, infrastructure, strengthening mechanisms for faculty and staff recruitment, rewards, and retention. Conducting an assessment of what constitutes a strong environment for research, creative scholarship, and graduate professional education. Continuing the development and introduction of a values-based financial model. Developing a plan to infuse our campus with technology, and continue to develop a master plan that creates a 21st century living and learning environment. I look forward to talking with you about those and many other issues. Chair Blonder, I'm happy to answer questions.
With respect, I'd be very interested in how there is a good outcome for the future of the university with apparently swinging cuts in graduate fellowship. For example, the Reedy Quality Achievement Fellowship, which I and many other faculty have used in the past to recruit outstanding graduate students, has been cut by 2/3. So it's no longer a 3-year award, it's only a 1-year award. There have also been apparently some pretty large cuts in other graduate fellowships. how is this good for our research, for our undergraduates who are taught in labs and interact with our graduate students? Where will this go in terms of the future of the university?
Sure. Thank you for your question. And first of all, tell me how you were informed of those cuts. Tell me the source of funds for those.
I received a memo from the graduate school that laid out the prospective funding and number levels for graduate fellowships for the 13 to 14 academic year.
Okay. And do you know the source of those funds?
Source of the funds?
I mean, when they're named for somebody, I just wanted to be sure, are they general funds? Well, I think I shared with you before that I hope we have the opportunity in growing our revenues in a smart way to be able to support graduate education. And there is no final decision made in something like that, and we are happy to look at it. Excuse me, Lee. You told me I was supposed to give priority to senators. Okay, so I'll go with right here. I think I saw your hand up, then I'll move on.
Can you hear me? Okay. Eli Edwards, student, College of Education. So I want to start by thanking you for your time here today. I know you came here to listen, and I really appreciate that because I know there's been a couple other instances where you've asked for my opinion, and I gave it to you, and you followed through on it. So, and I hope the same care is taken with what I'm about to bring up. So I'm just curious with the retention, it always seems to focus on academic advising and how crucial that is to the retention rates of the university as given by the survey, the sophomore attrition survey taken in 2011. And I know that right now, currently, in several key colleges, which I know this wasn't your personal decision because it's up to each individual college on what cuts they decide to make, but in several key colleges, academic advising is drastically being cut, or just the system, it's not working. So I was wondering, how can these cuts be in line with the university's decision to increase retention? And so since it is college-based, is there any university-wide plan to ensure that academic advising will be strong and will continue forward since advising is so crucial to the university?
Sure. So I think one of the terrific issues that is surfaced in all this discussion is advising. All right? And we have lots of information we have gathered in the past and more information we're gathering today to see about how advising works. And I'm deeply committed to it. We have interesting distributions in advising across colleges and different approaches to it. One of the interesting bits of information is if you look at the graduating senior survey and look at the trends in terms of satisfaction with advising, and I think we have lessons to learn from that. That's part of the engagement. As the provost and I look at ways to go forward, it certainly is my commitment to strengthen advising. One of the things that worries me is we don't have the full complement of technology to support our advising. And I know we're working on that. Vince Kellen is hard at work on it. Some of the things that you love to see is, first of all, easy sort of class planning, degree auditing, software that is used by both the advisor and the student. To be able to have that kind of capability. We have our students churn a lot. They change majors and move from college to college. To have full access to the record of advising that a student has, I think, is the kind of capability we need to have. So we're looking carefully at advising. We haven't made any final decisions about advising, but it's certainly high on our radar screen. Thank you for the question. Yes.
There's a mic right here.
Alan DeSantis, Senator from the College of Communication and Information. One concern that my college, communication, including social work and fine arts, has concerns ex-deans' salaries. Previously, as you know, that was paid through the provost office, but is now being transferred to us next year. In my specific case, in the Department of Communication, we have 2 ex-deans who are wonderful, great, knowledgeable friends, but their $400,000 salary comprises about 30% of our total budget. And as I stand here and address you, I can see my friend and current dean standing over to my left, and he also has a home with us. So Dan, as of right now, you can never retire because that would account to about 50% of our total budget. So my question to you would be, is there anything now in the process in which we are trying to work out equitable and fair ways of handling this burden to some of our colleges?
Thanks for the question. I'm going to let Interim Provost Tracy answer it. I think there's a microphone down there, Tim.
Sorry, I just want to make sure I don't trip here through this. So currently we have a proposal in, and we're working with the President's Office for some non-recurring funds from the 11-12 tuition revenue that we would then work to phase that over 3 years, so that we would go from the college picking up 1/3 the first year, 2/3 the second year, and all of it the third year, and hopefully that will also allow some time for some of those people as they transition out of their careers. So that's the plan that we're working under right now, is a transition plan using some non-recurring funds.
Let me do one in the back, and then, is that all right, Lee? And then I'll come back to the front. Yes.
My name is Cynthia Zhang from Sociology. I come here for a personal issue. This is about a fellow, I'm a graduate student. This is about a former graduate student at Bill Edwards in Sociology. We were in the same office from 2007 to 8, and he worked as instructor in Sociology from 2008 to 2010. And in 2010, he was, he left the job. He didn't tell me, although we were really good friends. And later on, I learned it because there was a policy in the university that if you get a degree, PhD degree from UK, you cannot work here. I think the purpose for the policy is because we really want to be the top 20. What I want to say is that I think just because of this, we should consider him to be, we should consider to ask him to come back, because he had 2 years to prove that he was a really good instructor. And also, I mean, as a fellow graduate student, and those who have worked with him must have some idea about how competent he was as a graduate student and as an instructor. And his name is Bill Edwards. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I will confess that I'm not fully aware of all the university policies. I'm certainly unaware of that one. We're happy to take a look at it. Thank you for raising the. Oh, well, she already has a microphone, so then we'll come.
My name is Susan Larson. I'm an Arts and Sciences, Hispanic Studies. Graduate students provide the majority of undergraduate instruction in my college in Arts and Sciences. Their stipends are much lower than those of all of the stipends at our benchmarks. The graduate students teach, in my department at least, exactly twice as much. That's the data, we've investigated it. They teach twice as much as graduate students at our competitive programs. So these basically are very ambitious, extremely motivated people who come to the university not for the money, but because basically we have PhD programs that have taken decades to construct and to build. We have an enormous amount of cultural capital. We might not have a lot of money, but they come, again, for the cultural capital. So we're already so strained economically that even what are perceived as being slight budget cuts to the graduate school fellowships for recruitment, they will have an immediate impact on the ability to remain competitive with our benchmarks. And what's perhaps even more important, it's going to have an immediate impact on the quality of undergraduate instruction as early as next fall, in my opinion. And I guess my question is, my impression of your presentation, it just seems to imply that graduate education here at UK is a drain on UK's budget. And in my experience, and just looking at the data, looking at the numbers, graduate student instruction of undergraduates is really at the heart of the undergraduate initiative here and our philosophy and our mission here at the university. So I guess my question to you is my impression incorrect? And the other part of my question is, what are we thinking when we talk about getting rid of fellowships for graduate students to remain competitive? Thank you.
Well, thank you for your question, and thank you for also letting me know your perceptions of what I said. Let me say I certainly did acknowledge what I thought was a fair assessment of the differences in cost and how you fund graduate education. I also acknowledge that there is teaching that goes on with that that's not entirely factored into, I think, what I was trying to contain in a simple presentation. I'm certainly aware of that. When I was in graduate school, I too was a teaching assistant. It helped me grow and prepare me for my opportunities in the future. My challenge is, and I've seen data, that we are low in our stipend levels across a broad array of programs. The question is how we generate those funds to grow those. Okay? Given the circumstances that I've shared with you. You know, the $50 million decline in state funding that recurs year after year after year. The potential decline in federal funding, which has been a resource for graduate students. So what I'm hoping we can do is, recognizing graduate students and what they provide to undergraduate education, if we smartly grow undergraduate education, if we were to increase our graduation rates by just 5 percentage points, that would be $10 million in recurring funds every year. And I hope we do those kinds of things so we can do exactly what you're describing. Okay, I think you were next.
Gail Bryan, College of Engineering.
I don't think that's on. But it is on.
Gail Bryan, College of Engineering and College of Public Health. I've been hearing about this RCM budgeting process, and since we don't exactly have it worked out what we're going to do, people are still positioning themselves thinking about how it will happen. And one of the most concerning things that I've heard is how this will impact collaborative programs. It will siloize what has been, for me, in the environmental field, something that's very collaborative across colleges. And I would like to know what sort of policy we can have in place to preserve these cross-college. I mean, I was basically told we should quit cross-listing courses. And this, to me, seems to be an inefficient use of our resources that's being brought about by this budget model. How can we work against this?
Sure. I couldn't agree with you more. And that is a clear value that is surfaced in every one of these discussions. And Provost Tracy, who is leading this dialogue, has that on the forefront of how we would introduce anything to further encourage this and not dampen it. If you want to look at what other universities have done, look at our financial accountability website. I think we have several universities models listed there. We're not the only place that has considered something like this. And I think that that is a principle we should follow in going forward. Yes, sir.
Vershawn Young, the Department of English.
Sorry, Sean.
Vershawn Young. I wanted to ask a question about how it is that you couldn't ask the administrators to encourage them for the 5% reduction, but you can fire people.
Let me say that anytime somebody lost a job opportunity at the University of Kentucky, it pains me. It also pains me to think that we don't prepare ourselves for the future to grow the possibility for additional jobs here, and that's what I'm committed to do. I think I stated earlier the reasons that I wouldn't go back and rescind a commitment made by this university to any individual. And I think that that too is a fair principle. But thank you for raising the question, and thank you for your compelling expression of your sentiments. Thank you. Yes? Lee.
President Caputo, we're getting several people sending notes in, so I'd like to ask a question from the notes.
Sure.
Can you speak to your commitment to hiring people of color and women in upper administration? Most recently, we have seen hiring decisions made despite a pool which include women and people of color to hire white males.
Yes, let me say that number one, when we search, we certainly try to get a search committee that deeply values those expressions that you've just mentioned. Okay, we work real hard to get a diverse pool of candidates, and we do work to hire the best person we can find. I'll only bring up sort of one example, but you know, we just concluded a search for a general counsel. I had an interim general counsel who was female. I really tried to convince the person to be a candidate. That wasn't something that we could work out, but we hired an excellent person in Bill Throw. But I am committed to this. One of the things you certainly notice about the University of Kentucky when you arrive, and it's around the tables at which I make decisions, is the diversity of perspectives and color and gender there at those tables. Those have been meaningful to me since I arrived here, and I certainly want it to be that case that way in the future. Yes.
My name is Madeline Wright. I'm a student from the College of Arts and Sciences. Today, the North Campus parking lot was permanently closed to students and employees who have passes there to begin construction on a new dorm. While I do support the improvement of campus infrastructure and think that it's really important to recruiting new students and retaining students, I have to ask, why must this construction begin now in the middle of the semester at the sacrifice of current students and employees who have already purchased passes for the year? Also, regarding transparency and communication, why were pass holders only given 1 week's notice of the parking lot's closure?
Mind answering that one, Bob?
I think you asked me.
Why don't you use the microphone?
Bob Wiseman. The construction period for the new halls is set by the opening date of August 2014. So if you back up an 18 to 20 month construction schedule, it's the situation had to take place immediately. We did recognize that parking was going to be lost. We're creating extra spaces in some small areas around North Campus. We have adjusted our parking for Good Sam employees over in our Jersey Street lot. We've increased spaces available there. The students are probably the most inconvenienced because they have to go out to the stadium, but we are making the adjustments we can. And in the master planning process down here, we're looking at where we could locate a parking garage on North Campus. So we understand the situation and are doing our best to accommodate that.
Right here.
like to just call attention to a different kind of infrastructure. Lisa O'Connor, College of Communication and Information. Thank you. If we want a top-notch distance program, we also have to have an infrastructure for that. And right now, frankly, I think we're lagging far behind on that. We just tried a big pilot of Canvas. There's a lot of enthusiasm, and we're essentially told we're going to be with Blackboard for a long time because we can't afford anything else. In terms of people who can support these things, we're short-staffed. We're using GoToMeeting software. They're intended for 15 people, not classrooms. So I just want to highlight that that's another sort of infrastructure we're really going to have to consider as we go forward.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think one of the reasons I shared this information about some of the changes you see across our state is, you know, I'm not telling people what to do, but what I'm trying to say is if we want to afford opportunity, we've got to have the infrastructure in place to do this. And we've got to have the infrastructure arrayed in an efficient mechanism. And visiting your college last week, I'd have to say I was pretty dazzled by some of the online programs that are being offered by your college under some less than optimal circumstances. So thank you for letting me know. Yes, sir.
Greg Wasilkowski, Engineering. I understand that you cannot or don't want to reduce the salaries of former deans and presidents. However, I think it would be very fair if they were required to have a decent DOE like all other faculty have, that they would have to teach and do some research and not only just to have nice offices for and do nothing. You promise.
I'll only say I'll keep that in mind when I'm no longer a president. You'll have my commitment that I understand your sensitivities to those matters. Thank you for raising it. It's really not something I had anything to do with in the past, but I take it seriously. Let's have one here, and then we're going to go back to the group there.
Yeah, Armando Prats, College of Arts and Sciences. I think that I want to accept the reality that you have put up in front of us. But I think that fails if you don't somehow allow it to include the dream of higher education. So that it isn't only about providing jobs. We're not a vocational school. And people have not only minds, but hearts and souls. And the 4 years of college can be a transformative experience for many people who come in totally unsuspecting that a university can do that for them. And so what I would like to know is, what can you as president and the office of the president do in order to work that dream into the reality?
Sure. Would you do me a favor? You have said that. Could you give him the microphone back? Do you mind? Okay. You've said that quite compellingly. I agree with it. I'd love for you to share with me what you think some of the things are that my office should do to ensure that.
Happy to do it.
Thank you.
I've got a hold of you.
I was going to ask you to do it now. I didn't know it happened. I didn't mean to limit your time. Okay, we'll come back to you. Okay, all right.
I'm the president of the Graduate Student Congress. I'm also in the Educational Policy Studies and Evaluation program.
Yes.
And our question is, what information can we provide to work with you in your office to ensure that there's a clear picture of what services and what what we bring to the university culture as a whole and how we can work to protect that in the future. And the second part of the question is, I'm wondering what your vision for the role of the graduate school is, given the impending budget cuts, not just the funding allocation, but its role in general.
Sure. If you don't mind, I'm going to let Provost Tracy address some of those.
Sorry, I couldn't see you. I was facing this way, but somewhere. Hi. So the graduate school is one of those academic units that we're going through like all the other colleges, and we're going through the proposed reductions and then walking through the impact of those reductions. We've not approved any cuts to the graduate school or any specific cuts, and I know I've heard some comments about that today, but those haven't been approved by me yet. We're still looking at the 13-14 budget and going through those things, and again, looking at all those factors, gathering data, and trying to make the best decisions possible to minimize that impact. So, you know, certainly you can provide information to me as well, but we're still working through that, and that's not been completed yet.
Bob, he had his hand up there.
Bob Grossman, Arts and Sciences. So, first a comment. Thank you for coming here, and thank you for responding to these questions. This is something that I think needs to happen more often. But second, there are two numbers I've heard that have upset people, I think, more than any other numbers. And one of them I won't talk about, but the other is $20 million being put aside in debt service for a building program that hasn't been approved by the legislature. The false crisis phrase that you mentioned earlier, I think, was directly in reference to the $20 million being set aside for debt service on debt that we're not allowed to accumulate currently. So, and a lot of people are concerned, first of all, what will happen to this $20 million if the legislature continues in its obstinacy to not give us permission that most other universities in the country have, but will it just become a playground for special projects, pet projects? But also, why does all $20 million have to be allocated this year when we are currently facing such drastic cuts from the state?
Sure. Yeah. So I won't repeat for you again the dire straits we are when it comes to our infrastructure here. We patch and put more good money after bad than is necessary. It is wholly inefficient to be spending millions of dollars to retrofit small labs in antiquated buildings, to introduce entirely new heating and air conditioning systems, evacuation systems, all those kinds of things. I mean, you end up paying double for these things when you want to do them. So we can keep on limping along like that, spending $2 or $3 million, cobbling something together, do a building, meaning an office here and a little lab here, or so forth. That's what we can do. But I don't think it's going to get us where we need to be. As far as putting the money aside, last year the governor did put this in his budget, and we asked to have a flexible list of projects that we could use it on so that we could combine philanthropy with this debt service and really leverage funds to get more than one project off the ground. The General Assembly didn't include that in its final budget. One of the questions I got when I went around and to talk to members of the General Assembly was, well, how are you going to pay for it? Where are you going to designate the revenues? Have you done that yet? And so forth. So one of the ways to get that approval and demonstrate that you do have the wherewithal is to make it explicit in your budget. I am confident that people, first of all, despite the challenges we face, so deeply appreciate this place and what you do. We have brought countless groups on this campus now to take them through where you work. I've brought dozens of legislators here to point out the conditions that we face here. I show them what other universities are doing around the country, and I advocate strongly for a commitment. I am confident that in the future, I don't know exactly when that is, that they will give us the opportunity to do this. If they didn't, trust me, as much attention as we have placed upon this now, it's not going to be some piggy bank that we're going to play with. You would be consulted on how we would use it. Yes.
Okay. Can you hear me? I'd like to follow up on Bob's question. And I think this gets at the heart of it. Our academic and student support units have just taken a very substantial cut. We're down to the point that any further cuts are going to degrade the very heart of the instructional mission of this university, not to mention the research and the outreach. In order to build a building fund, the academic units have been told to prepare, and the support units, such as the graduate school and their fellowships, have been told to prepare for another 4+%. Have you done a cost-benefit analysis to see if the building fund and the other initiatives in undergraduate education are going to offset the negative impacts that these impending budget cuts are going to have on our educational mission?
Sure. Thank you for your question, and it's not just a building fund. It's uncompetitive salaries that worsen every year we don't address them. It's the staff member who tells me last week, you know what, you haven't done anything with my salary in 5 years, and the people you hire in now for the same job are paid more than I am. We have compression, and those are the other things I listen to as well. So it's trying to rebalance all of this. Believe me, I understand what you're saying. It is why the provost is going to work so closely with our units to understand the impact of the targets we have given people. Okay? That's the commitment we make to you. That's the dialogue that is going on here. I told you that I feel encouraged by our enrollment and what that can mean for our revenues. And I'm encouraged that the provost is going to have flexibility to look across everything we're doing and address those pressure points that we see. Yes, sir.
I have a comment about process and then a question about the model. Herman Farrell with the College of Fine Arts, Department of Theater. My concern as a senator is some things that I've heard over the last couple of weeks with regard to how the Senate's voice is being heard by the Board of Trustees. Last year we had a contested battle about an issue with regard to Gatton College. I don't want to go into a debate about it. We went back and forth on it, and we voted against it, and the Board of Trustees ended up voting in favor of the proposal. From what I heard from the Kentucky Colonel and from Irina Voro in an email that she sent out to us just recently, there were questions about this call for this meeting and even our demands coming from the Senate Council. It sounded to some extent, from even the quote from the Kentucky Colonel, like the Vice Chair of the Board of Trustees was questioning whether or not the Senate actually represents and stands for and is the voice of the 2,000 members of the faculty. You're the President of the Senate. I hope as we go forward that you will convey to them that when the Senate speaks, especially like it did last month on these issues, that we are speaking on behalf of the faculty. The fact that you're here proves that, but I hope that you will pass that on as well to the Board of Trustees.
You know, I've worked closely with our board for the past year and a half now. And I think in particular, when we share with them the many challenges that you've expressed here, they internalize those and they feel them deeply as well. I think they have the highest respect. I think they have the highest respect for what we do here. I remind them of it all the time. And I would ask you too to, I think, feel good about how they want to be our strong advocates. And let me tell you this too, that when we work so hard on particular things that we need to have expressed at governmental levels and all, they're our strongest advocates in those arenas as well. And so these are people that feel deeply about our university. I am their employee. I tell them that my responsibility is to be that bridge in conversations between the faculty, staff, and students and our board. And I'm committed to working in that spirit.
Thank you. Now my question, though, is based on something else. I apologize if I'm hogging the
Sure.
microphone with two questions. But back in the 1960s, the notion of a university as a factory was put forward. Now, the university as a factory was being put forward. Now, it seems to me with this value-based financial model, what's being called upon, what the units are being asked to do is to become franchises. And the university is almost like the McDonald's that's now giving the franchise out to individual units. I'm a lawyer and not a business person, and Gatton folks can correct me on that, but that's the way I see this model going forward. My question is that really the job of individual units to be in this position where they have to be entrepreneurs? I come from the College of Fine Arts Theater Department. We do it all the time. We have to sell tickets. But other units, I won't name any of you, but there are other units that their job and their focus is on the educational mission, period. The notion that they also will have to take on this additional burden and responsibility seems like it's passing off to us something that's really in the realm and in the authority and the power of the university structure, meaning the upper levels. It just seems like now we're being tasked with doing some of the job, some of the functioning that you're supposed to take care of. And that's my concern about this model.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to say that, you know, I could just ask you to all fill out a survey and tell me how to spend your money, and that would be it. But the problem is you're the ones that make all this happen. And I'm going to confess I'm not smart enough to make all the decisions across a $2.7 billion enterprise. Maybe you could in the 60s. Maybe you can at a small university, but here we're in a much more complex arena. And you know, I haven't forgot when I visited your college and somebody said to me, I just feel put upon. Okay? That has really stuck with me. I understand that, but what I ask you is, this is not just to pass it on to you. This is a way to empower you. Okay, and let me give you a couple of examples. So when I was at the College of Communication last week, and someone told me what they had done in their fully online program. And they said, you know what, we're using Google Ads. I don't even know what Google Ads is. Far be it from me to be telling somebody how to recruit people to a fully online program. They said, we use Google Ads. We recruit nearly 50% of our students now from this mechanism. It's a fully online program. We understand that for every $540 per applicant spent on Google Ads, we have a return of revenues of $21,000. And you may not like that, but those are fair things for people to consider when they're building a program. You know, and they say, we want to be able to have this program and have the people that can properly, the array of people, talent, depth to teach in this program. And we think through this mechanism, we've increased our tuition revenues alone $800,000. So they asked me, what am I going to do about the professors they need? And what I would ask you is, you know, imagine if administration had to make that decision across program after program after program after program after program. So all we're trying to do is not put ourselves upon anybody, but try to say, look, we want to give you the information. We want to empower you in a system that is fair, that respects interdisciplinary activities and so forth, but allows you to seize an opportunity like that I can't see. You can. So that's what we're trying to do, not just pass on a liability to you at all. Yes, sir.
So, Andrew Hipsley, Arts and Sciences. So at the very beginning of your presentation, you said we are a research institution. And you've also said in the past that you have a wonderful faculty. I just want to make the point, those aren't disconnected. The faculty are wonderful, brilliant minds around you, but that's because we're a research institution. And what I think a lot of people don't quite understand, and that's why the one place where the memo gets emotional and we implore you, but we don't ask you, we implore you, is the graduate program cutting. We don't understand how undergraduate and graduate education is disjunctive. We see them as a seamless web of education. So when you say that undergraduate education is the priority and graduate education is secondary, people who are research active and have conduct research-based teaching don't get that. The graduate program and the research being done because of the graduate program by faculty actually leads to great undergraduate students. The best magnet program in the state of Kentucky is at Paul Laurence Dunbar School, where they do a STEM magnet program. I was there recently. Those students come to Kentucky because they do internships with our research active faculty. They have offers from Harvard, Princeton, I saw all the banners, but they come to Kentucky because they had a wonderful time with research active faculty. So my question is, instead of treating undergraduate and graduate education as disjunct priorities, could you reframe the priority as education and see the two as a seamless web, and any threat to the graduate program and the research that ensues from the graduate program, would you please think of ring fencing that kind of threat?
Sure. You know, all the things we've talked about today certainly come back to education. They certainly come back to putting students first. And I'm happy to do that. And I try to do that. Our provost reorganized his office to have a vice provost for student success, and that is undergraduate and graduate students. The support we give to units is really not divided according to graduate and undergraduate education. We're at this stage trying to, you know, grow our way to the top rather than just certainly cut and hunker down for the future. Undergraduate education provides an opportunity to do that. I've never seen a great research university that didn't have a great undergraduate program. I recognize that you can't do it without outstanding faculty. You can't do it with unfairly paid or compensated faculty and staff. So when we're not directing a salary plan to just undergraduate professors. It's to the whole here. So I agree with what you say. I entirely think that these are intertwined, and I hope you'll respect that when we go forward and try to address the pressure points you and others have raised, we will look very carefully at that. Okay? Thank you. Yes, sir.
Heath Martin from the libraries. In addition to the periodicals that you mentioned with respect to the university libraries, the feedback from the faculty also mentioned a broader set of concerns, including the book budget and the faculty and staff in the libraries. And I think that's a recognition that, in many ways, like a modernized classroom or facilities, that a state-of-the-art library is essential to the research and teaching mission of a research institution across the disciplines. So I wondered what you would do in the context of the new budgeting model specifically to ensure that that level of support for the libraries continues, and also because we would hope to work with whoever is the provost at any given time on those issues, if there was a reason that representation from the libraries was not included on the provost search committee that was recently announced.
Sure. Well, first of all, it's impossible to represent every college and every unit in the university on the search committee, but as we go forward in that search, believe me, all the units that are important to the provost certainly will be involved. The issue about a model going forward, these models that one thinks about in the future are not mindless formulaic models. They involve a good degree of judgment and assessment. So that is a critically important unit to the fabric of this university. We're going to address it now. I'm sure we will address it, in the future, whatever sort of model we have. Our library is an incredible resource for this university. I was so impressed that they made the decision, working with our educational components, to take space that's in there, that's a pretty marvelous library, and further advance it so it meets the educational needs of students. So we're committed to these. But back to the other units that serve all of you. So certainly since I've been here, I've heard complaints about how we don't do things so well. Some of the services we provide you aren't what you want them to be. And I want you to know that part of looking at this assessment model too, and this budgeting, is how we maintain accountability of those units to you. Okay? That's as much as part of this discussion as the academic piece.
Thanks for being here. Bria Perry, Arts and Sciences. I have a question about one of the specific requests from the Senate memo, and that was about your response to the request for a committee that would advise you on budget issues. Mm-hmm. And your response to that was that you would potentially allow the Senate to appoint people to 2 existing committees. So I'm wondering what you might do to prevent that from becoming a situation similar to the Board of Trustees, in which faculty has one representative whose vote essentially doesn't count at all.
Well, first of all, let me say that we already have faculty on those committees. I'm adding more. They're a deeply appreciated perspective, and it includes others who hold responsibility too. We're not voting on a budget. The Board of Trustees votes on a budget, a general one. We are looking through budget planning and budget ideas, and recommendations would be made. And I'm going to hear from you, I'm sure, again, and we'll continue to seek input from that group and others. At the end of the day, I would have to make a recommendation to the Board of Trustees about a macro budget. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Ashley, and I'm a graduate student in the College of Arts and Sciences. And I'd like to say thank you for addressing us, first of all, and listening to our concerns. And I'd also like to say that perhaps I'm not fully understanding some of these issues that you're raising. But I would, from my understanding, is that you're kind of emphasizing undergraduate education at the cost of some of these other programs. This has been mentioned several times. And I'm really kind of concerned that you're not fully addressing some of these issues in graduate programs and research, which makes me a little bit nervous, because part of this is we are a research institution, and as a research institution, we need to be able to address these issues with research and graduate programs. I have a couple kind of specific questions. First of all, with building these undergraduate residential halls, you said it's going to bring some 2,000 beds. Do we know that we are able to fill these halls in addition to the halls that we already have? Additionally, you're talking about increasing faculty teaching loads. And do we know that this increase is really going to cover all of these new incoming students that you are suspecting will enter these residence halls? And is that increase in faculty teaching
You're
really
exceeding my memory, so I got two questions.
Well, this is kind of related. So
Sure.
Is this really going to this faculty increase in teaching, is that going to cover the loss of graduate student TAs?
All right. Okay, so first of all, the residence halls. So we have 2,918 beds. We turn away hundreds, and I would bet, because students know we don't have it, thousands don't apply to live in our residence halls. Okay? 600 out of 6,000 beds are modern. 85% of our freshmen are willing to pay an additional cost to live in those 600 beds. 85%. So we turn away thousands who want that kind of housing. You also have to look at what other universities are offering, and let me assure you, we are way behind the curve on it. You can't attract these students. I talked to a president of a university this week that's doing quite well, and he said a survey of students said, why did they choose this campus? And it was the academic programs first, but also the physical condition of the campus. It's just a reality. Now, the important thing about this is we didn't use state funds. We didn't use our funds. This is money all from outside Kentucky that wants to invest in this campus. There's no debt of ours associated with this. This is a wonderful opportunity. This is a publicly traded company. They came in and assessed us as well and said, is this a great market for our investors? And we were #1 on the list. So believe me, there are all kinds of market assessments that make clear we can fill these beds. We have excess demand. The question about the teaching, okay? What we're trying to figure out is, what are the fair teaching loads and workload issues that you raised across the units? Because they vary tremendously. So we're trying to work with our deans and all to make sure, we assign the resources to those places that are having the demand for teaching and learning. What was your third? Yeah.
The other point was that is this increase in faculty teaching load, is that going to kind of circumvent the issues that are going to occur by cutting graduate funding and TA-ships and that sort of thing?
Yeah, so, you know, you have pushed us, a lot of you have, on the array of teaching that is done by TAs, part-time, and full-time faculty. And so that's something we're exploring. I think it's a very fair question that we've got to work through. Yes, sir.
Thanks so much for being here. When I listen to you, I feel very disappointed because I do not understand. Can you hear now?
Name.
Oh, my name is Carlos de la Torre. I direct international studies. I feel disappointed because you are not addressing some of the issues in a way in which I would like them to be addressed. For instance, you talk about a crisis. I come from a region, Latin America, where a crisis means a meltdown. And I see a massive effort in building infrastructure. I see athletics program growing and growing and having incredible revenues. So I'm not convinced that there is a crisis. I am not convinced that there is a need to do all of the budget cuts that you have done so far. So please explain why this crisis is so deep that we have to go to these painful cuts that have meant people's jobs, that means increasing our teaching load, that perhaps will mean losing lecturers, losing graduate students, and transforming a top research university into a mediocre teaching college. Because with big classes and with fewer professors and graduate students, the undergraduate education is going to be much lower than what it is now. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Well, I won't repeat everything I've said before. I will state to you that all the things we're talking about here today, unfortunately, cost money. And how we best allocate resources and empower our faculty to shape their destinies is what I'm committed to doing. We have been very open and transparent about this budget. I did not want to rush it into the late spring of the year. Through this process, the issues that you and others have expressed, we're going to address as best we can. The assumptions about class sizes and section sizes and how many we have and how many we had last year, and after we invested $6 million in a core, what was addressed, what did those section sizes change and so forth. Those are very meaningful to me too. Very meaningful to me. That affects the quality, certainly, of the learning here, and I'm deeply committed to addressing those. Thank you. Let's come down to the front, I think. Yes.
Mirek Tuszczyński, College of Engineering. I come back to the forces that you are saying, and I agree with this, are there putting universities, academia under a lot of pressure. There should be discussion of these topics on our campus, and I felt that until today there was none. At least there was none that would cross the gap that there is between administration and faculty. Mm-hmm. Faculty have a lot to say about this, thought a lot about that. Perhaps administration is thinking about that too. The discussion today seems to indicate to me that we are thinking about these things in different ways. And so I'd like to ask you to pledge that you will work to close the gap, to create functioning, meaningful fora where faculty can voice their opinions, faculty, students, staff, in the presence of administrators, that meetings like this don't happen once every 5 years, but happen once a semester, that we really know what we think.
Sure. So I'm happy to attend your meetings. I regret that your next meeting date, I already note that I have a conflict. But I'll tell you a little bit about me. I served 9 years as a provost. And the president I served with for 9 years, we attended every faculty senate meeting. I bet we missed in 9 or 10 years, 7 or 8. I'm very comfortable with sharing information and having this kind of dialogue. It's not foreign to me. So. And I will say, too, you know, I welcome, you know, the idea of a forum like this, but, you know, meeting with small groups has been very helpful to me, too. I hear a great deal of helpful information there, and people challenge us, and we'll look for opportunities to share what we hear at those meetings as well.
I have a lap full, so I'm going to stay seated. Deborah Anderson, College of Nursing. I want to just mention 2 words that I think we're skirting around, but we're talking about, and that's shared governance. It seems to me that that's really what a lot of these questions are about. And I would like for you to talk about your philosophy of shared governance in the university setting.
Sure. Well, I've shared with you certainly how I held administrative positions in the past and the dialogue that I always like to keep open. I'm happy to, and the way I look at this is the folks in this room are the folks that make things happen here. I recognize that. I have been in your shoes. What we're trying to do is further empower units to have in their hands the levers to pull to make things happen. And that it's not just a responsibility of administration. So part of shared governance to me is further empowering, especially colleges, to shape their destinies, to have control over many decisions, and that not be rest solely in the hands of administration.
First question, a 4% cut to the College of Arts and Sciences will amount to $26 million. If half of this cut is absorbed by teaching assistant positions, the college will lose 100 TAs and 200 classes per semester. How will this advance undergrad education?
Is that number correct? Let me say this. Say it again. I'm positively encouraged by the trends in our revenues. We set these as a target, and we're working with every unit through a process that honestly exchanges lots of information. I can't comment on the specifics of what was just raised there, but I will give you every assurance that we're going to address all of these things going forward. Yes.
In 2010, UK implemented a 5-year vesting period for the university's contribution to staff and employee pensions. The first and second wave of budget cuts have and will inevitably result in the university taking back pension benefits from employees who are terminated. Not only are we losing valuable staff, this gives the appearance that the university is actually making money from firing people. What are your plans to mitigate this problem?
Well, first of all, let me remind you again that our university grew its faculty by 9% since the beginning of the recession, our administration by 6%, and our staff by 2%. We had a reduction in force of 1%. I do not know the details of the vesting plan. It's something I'd have to ask HR about. Sorry, I don't know. Sure.
Can you give us the best and worst case scenarios in the new budget for a cooperative extension at this time?
So cooperative extension, and does everybody know what that is? You're divided on that one. Okay, so cooperative extension. We have a long history here in Kentucky of cooperating with each county in the operation of an extension office that provides services to that county. They are rooted in our sort of founding as an agriculture and mining university, and these have changed over time. For instance, you can find county agents who are STEM agents, who work to develop a pipeline of students in science, technology, engineering, mathematics. There are fine arts agents out there today. But largely, from the many visits I've had, they serve, first and foremost, the agricultural community, which is certainly important to Kentucky. So of our $280 million, a good chunk comes in and goes out to the counties and is matched by the counties. Tens of millions of dollars. Okay, it's not spent on this campus. But that's part of our land grant mission. So I can tell you what we did this year. These are the challenges. That is certainly a service unit, and it's also an academic one as well. So we started with a 6% state cut. Now, to be quite stark about it, you could say, well, we should just pass on a 6% cut to those units. But after lots of conversation and all, we mitigated these cuts through really tuition revenue. I shared with you there's no other revenue that increased. And we used that to mitigate those reductions in 120 counties. It's a tough choice to make, folks. Because there's nothing here we're doing bad. Not a thing. But what we've got now is, a broad array of commitments that we want to maintain and foster and grow. And that's why we're looking for, revenues to support those kinds of things. Yes?
Hi, my name is Erin Edgar. Can you hear me?
You are good without the microphone.
Hi, I'm Erin Edgar. I'm on the executive board of the Graduate Student Congress. I'm also a doctoral candidate in the English department, and like many of the other graduate students in here, I teach every semester. I've been here for about 2 hours now, and I keep waiting to hear some kind of specifics about graduate education, the budget cuts that are coming up, and 2 hours and I'm still waiting. So can you give us some more specifics?
Sure. Let me say, as I said earlier, we are going through a process to reach those decisions. It involves exchange, open forum, meetings. So we are a generation of data, different perspectives to be weighed to make those decisions. That's why I can't give you the answer today.
Can I just follow that up? When do you expect these? When do you, Bob Grossman, Kentucky, Earth Sciences. When do you expect these decisions to be made? Will there be an opportunity, another opportunity, once decisions have been made, will there be an opportunity for feedback from the community as a whole at a meeting such as this, or meetings with the Senate or Senate committees, to give you further feedback before the decisions are completely finalized?
Sure.
Date.
As I said and as I pointed out in the slide on planning, we have another round of discussions and decision-making in November. It's next month. So we'll come back and consult and confer at different levels. Yes, ma'am.
Liz Depsky, A&S. Yeah, so we're having a little difficulty with this idea that originally we were told that plans had to be in by the deans by October 1st, that October was a month of assessment during which the provost and you would try to figure out what the impacts of these cuts would be. And here it is, we're at the end of October, and we still don't have any sense of the immensity of these cuts. And at the same time, you said several times, I believe, that nothing has been implemented yet. And that is difficult to believe, given that, the fellowships have been cut, the advising has, in my own college, been pretty dismantled or extraordinarily disrupted. That advising, for the biggest major of the college in biology, the department to which I belong, has been taken back by the faculty. And we're getting reports of people that have already lost their jobs as a result of the second round of cuts, including people that are very much involved in diversity and diversity recruitment programs. And so it becomes very difficult to understand when exactly this faculty is going to have a opportunity to react to these impending cuts, or when you're in fact going to have any kind of cost-benefit assessment, as Connie Woods asked you earlier, about the wisdom of taking such deep cuts, or perhaps, again, moderating your approach on this put away of $20 million. So I'd like your reaction to that, please.
Sure. First of all, it is 15. First of all, a minor correction. It's not $20 million, it's 15. Okay, you got to carefully look at those numbers in all of this, and we will. What I'm giving you today and my willingness to be here is a commitment to listen, to gather the information that you're sharing today in both a heartfelt way. We have an obligation to look across our units in the way we distribute resources to address the very matters that you raised. And we are committed to doing that. Okay? That's the pledge I give to you. Sure.
One more thing, and this is perhaps a terrible thing to say, but it is a charge that's out there, that in fact you've been a bit inflexible about this budget plan, that the budget that you presented in May is exactly the budget that is going forward at this time. So could you give this faculty a concrete example of how input has changed any issue of that budget plan?
So all I'll be able to say I think you will, all I ask you to do is wait until we make these decisions. I put the budgets out there as targets to generate the very discussion we're having, to weigh these many trade-offs and forces that we face in higher education at the University of Kentucky, so that the decisions we make are most informed and as best as they can be. So that this is certainly an important conversation to me, and I would not have prompted it if it was going to be a hollow set of discussions.
Have been given 90 days notice and already told not to come into work tomorrow? That's
well, you need to talk to your dean and have your dean talk to our provost about anything that's been issued like that, okay? We'll do that. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Don Gross, Arts and Science. There's often a lot of discussion about budgetary transparency, and partly you are suffering the sins of your father. This university has never been very good in openness of budgetary policy. And sometimes we're sort of told, don't listen to those rumors. One here in a graduate program, But then the other individual tells us that we're considering alternatives. It seems to me that if you really want to talk about budgetary openness, it would be nice to know what are if we knew what the alternatives were, as opposed to having a decision made and say, we've made these decisions. Because we can't comment on how this is going to affect our programs unless we know what the alternatives are.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Alice Christ, College of Fine Arts. I agree with that comment, and I'd like to follow it up a little bit. I think maybe the most important point in the Senate's Senate Council memo is the request for a committee that would be faculty representation on the policy issues that de facto cuts raise for the whole university. I think we have a problem, I have a problem with the process of demanding cuts out of small, low-level individual units, which are informed by some faculty discussion, but then any decisions about which cuts will be revised or reprieved only come down from the top. So do you have a plan to incorporate a greater consensus building mechanism?
Well, first of all, let me say that I would hope as we move forward in the future that many of these decisions rest with the college and don't involve so much of sort of administration strict oversight of every decision. But as we work towards something like that, in the meantime, all right, in the meantime, we are really trying to engage on all of the issues that you just raised. And we will try to complete this process as soon as we can with further consultation, by including more people on the committees that have invested lots of time at looking at these matters. You've already had a question. Excuse me. I'm going to try to get to somebody new. Back.
Michael Cavanero, Arts and Sciences. We're generally familiar with other institutions that have gone through the change in the budgeting model that's being contemplated right now. And what we hear from people at other institutions is that there is both good potential to that change, but there's also problems that come up in the process of that change, particularly with respect to chasing student credit hours versus weighing other kinds of important parts of the university. What's troublesome to many people about the change in the budgeting model is that it's taking place at the same time as severe budget cuts, as well as at a time when we have no permanent academic leadership on the campus in the form of a permanent provost. And so what we're going to be doing is recruiting a provost to come into a system where all the rules have been changed in a very short period of time, and that provost will have to accept those changes fait accompli. So I'm wondering about the wisdom of implementing that change in the budgeting process at such a difficult period in our history.
Sure. Let me say this about introducing any budgeting process. Please listen to me. We do not want to introduce volatility by being reckless in any introduction of any budgeting system. It is trying to take a step forward in transparency and empowering colleges. We don't want to do anything that doesn't give units adequate time to plan. And here's the other thing about it. We want something that is enduring so that people understand not just what may happen next year, but what would happen in 5 years as you plan and address many of these matters. I will say this, though. If you look at all those universities, too, they certainly tweak them along the way to adjust them to the times. And certainly if we go in that direction, we're going to do it with great consultation with people. This is not something we're trying to do in the dark.
Hi, Frank Richardson, College of Engineering, and I'm a graduate student. There have been a couple of things, kind of themes that have gone along that have brought some concern to me, particularly when we're in regards to the disjoint between undergraduate and graduate education. About 2/3 of the time I've been here, I've been a TA, and I've also worked as a resident engineer in Ingalls Hall. So I spend 24/7 with undergraduate students. And I get to hear the feedback from them every day, good and bad, about their classes, and particularly their TAs. And I think there's a unique position that the TA's in by being a student themselves and typically being closer in age group to the students that allows them to communicate and help them better. And having good TAs over and over again from the engineering students, I hear that having good TAs is instrumental in them being able to understand and get the help that they need. And I'm not sure that moving that work off to the faculty's hands is really fair to the undergraduate students if that's the decision to make. Secondly, another concern was you'd expressed an unwillingness to go back and look at existing contracts that were made for executive levels and former deans, but as a graduate student, I made a commitment to Kentucky a couple of years ago about the type of environment that I would be working in, and it seems that there may be an approach to have a willingness to kind of pull the rug out from under me and do things that may threaten my ability to complete my degree.
Thank you. Any other questions? There's one right here.
Daniel Fonfria, Arts and Science, Hispanic Department. In your presentation, you said that online education was going to be key for the university future success. And there are rumors in our department that the university is pushing for online courses. And one of the rumors as well is that every of those courses is going to have 50 students.
And every course is going to have what?
Yeah, every online course that the department is supposed to offer in the future is going to have 50 students enrolled. I don't know if you have ever taken a foreign language class online, but most people I know who took a class never learned a thing. So I'm a little bit concerned. I want you to address this issue. If it's true that we have to offer, or the university is going to force the department to offer the online courses, and how do you think the students are going to benefit?
First of all, I'm not forcing you to do anything.
Well, forcing, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Faculty
control the content of the curriculum here, and that's the way it's going to be. And they have the responsibility on how teaching and learning takes place. What I shared with you today are forces that are upon us. We can choose not to look at those. You can make that choice. But others are choosing to look at it. And it has consequences for what we do. What I think is important, that we empower colleges and set up systems to assess, introduce, integrate this technology into what we do. That's all I'm asking.
Questions from the notes here. Why does your administration cut revenue-producing teaching positions while creating completely new bureaucratic positions such as senior vice provost for student success that consume revenue? What is the rationale for that?
Sure. First of all, if you look at the administrative positions, first of all, in the office of the provost, there's one position that has been eliminated. All right, that's our commercialization vice president. I'll let the provost speak about his office. And again, you know, I didn't say this, but somebody is saying we should assess people by their revenue production. And you know, you could extend that to a place that I do not think is healthy. That's not the way I want to look at individual faculty and all, and I want to make clear that that is the case.
We eliminated 4 positions, 4 associate provost positions, and we created 1 position, the senior vice provost for student success. I did that because I thought it better aligned with the goals that we were trying to make, and that is having someone who owns student success and brought those units together to focus on that particular purpose. And so it's true, 1 position was created, 4 positions were eliminated. There were a number of reorganizations as part of that. And so it reduced the total number of direct reports to provost from 36 to 24. But some of that was moving people around to different reporting structures. But that's why that was created. So there were 4 eliminated, 1 created, and the idea was to focus on student success with the idea that that would then help increase our retention rates, our student success, and thus would have a direct benefit.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
David Piankowski, Engineering. It would be helpful for us if we could have a formal written business plan that detailed not only the things that you mentioned in your presentation, but gave us a listing of all the alternative courses of action that were considered, why they were rejected, and the rationale for the course of action being taken, and includes all the kinds of elements one would find in a well-conceived business plan appropriate for the magnitude of the undertaking that is being proposed that you'd find in a first-class organization.
Well, you know, many of our trustees expressed such an interest, and they want them at every unit level. You know, I think it is fair to look at the business approaches to what we do, but we are business-like, but we're not a business. I want to share that too. And not everything is measured in dollars and cents. And I don't plan to do that too. So we proposed an overarching budget in general terms. We are looking for certainly weighing alternatives in that. And I'm glad to come back and share with you, you know, what we conclude and as we go forward. I'll stay as long as you want to stay. If some people need to go, I will understand that too. But
what student services do you foresee cutting out or cutting back on? For example, the Writing Center, the study, tutoring, advising, counseling, diversity center, etc.
Sure, I'll take a stab at that because that's under the provost's office. All those things fall under various parts, undergraduate education, student affairs, international affairs, and all those. And we're going through those in the same methodical process. I'm meeting with all of those leaders and beginning to walk through and saying, what are the things that are going to have are things going to have a negative impact? And if so, how do we begin to try to mitigate those kinds of things? Again, hopefully we'll be able to make some adjustments as well. I made some adjustments back in May and June to, for instance, a college budget where I saw it was going to have a direct impact on UK core teaching. And so we'll walk through those. And so folks that lead those units, Ben Withers, Robert Mock, Susan Carvalho, and I are sitting down. That's why we're having multiple meetings walking through and really trying to say, what is the direct impact on students? What's the direct impact on faculty, staff? How do we walk through this and make the best decisions that we possibly can? Those are all very important things as we walk through them. We want to make sure that we fund the things as best as we can, the things that are important and have a direct benefit to student success.
Question back.
Janet Eldred, English Department, College of Arts and Sciences. As I've been listening to this, I want to get back to the kind of gap because I've heard you use the word empower, empower, empower. I'm not feeling so empowered, and I suspect that many in the room aren't. And in fact, if anything, what I'm feeling is a crisis of confidence. If I could say with certainty one thing, it would be that I have no confidence in the plan, or maybe I have no confidence at this point in the process. I've been at the university since 1987. I'm a fan of the university. I want things to go well. I want this administration to go well. But right now, my major overwhelming feeling is one I never had before, and that it is, I am not confident in the future of this institution. And I'm wondering, how do you address those feelings? Because I know I'm not alone.
Sure. Let me share with you why I think. Let me first address your feeling empowered. I'm here today out of a deep respect and with a willingness to listen, and what you say means much to me. And I hope at the end of this process you'll be able to say, he listened, people listened. That's what this was designed to do. So I hope you'll think differently. About our future being bright. Let me tell you some of the things, we face again. We have a flat or declining state budget. Those revenues are not going to appear anytime soon. We grew on temporary money the capacity to do lots of things. I've shared with you that our general sort of manpower in terms of faculty-student ratios indicates that we're in the ballpark with major universities. I could also share with you that universities that have a similar profile of students and faculty are moving these graduation rates, are doing much better than we are. I believe we can do it. I believe it takes difficult conversations. It's challenging ideas. But I believe this. I think we can smartly grow our way to a point that empowers us to do lots of the things that I've heard today. That's what we're trying to do. That's why having residence halls matter in recruiting of students. It's why when you take your enrollment from a 25% out of state to 31%, many with Kentucky connections, and your revenues shift in a positive way, it empowers us to do the things we want to do. And so that's the track I think we are on at a difficult time, but I'm highly confident we're going to make that future bright. I believe strongly in this place. I will work so hard for you to feel strongly as well. But thank you for being honest and open with the way you feel.
Hi, I'm Lisa Conley, Arts and Sciences. A couple of times you said that you can get back to us on the budget when decisions are made. When is that going to be? Like, when is the next forum? Or and what is the action going to be? Like, if we do have suggestions for budgets and ideas and alternatives, then what is that process of working those in?
Sure. First of all, your most certain way of expressing your concerns is through your department chair and through your dean and then through the provost. And you have fierce advocates for what you believe in. Let me assure you. Okay? And then there are processes that I will certainly use like this, and I'm glad to get back. I can't be here the next time you have a full Senate meeting, but I'm certainly willing to meet with Lee Blonder monthly. I can meet with her more frequently during this process that we go through to make sure we keep the lines of communication open.
Hi, I'm Jenny Rice from the Arts and Science College. I teach rhetoric, and one of the things that we teach first-year students when they're taking courses is that, you know, listening is a process that means that you are not just hearing the words, but that you're actually willing to kind of take a risk and have your mind changed. And one of the questions that was asked to you earlier was about your own flexibility. So you've heard a lot tonight. It's been almost 2.5 hours, and it's not easy to hear people who obviously have a lot of things on their mind and some critique. But I'm wondering, could you just take a second to reflect on what you've heard and give us a sense of your own willingness to risk changing your mind about certain things? Or are these decisions already in motion, and will you come to us when these decisions have been made and ask us to accept them and try to explain to us why you've made these decisions? Are you willing to have your mind changed at this point on any of these matters?
Let me say I didn't go through this process as a hollow gesture. I came here to listen. The process I set up and asked the provost to work through, involving all the units, was certainly with that spirit and intent. I said when I started today that I don't have all the questions, and I certainly don't even have all the, I don't have all the answers, and I don't even have all the questions. I also know, too, that we've certainly heard a lot of things here, but there's other information we need to work through and incorporate into our decision making, and we're going to work to do so. Now, I'm happy and enjoy having this kind of exchange, but I also have a responsibility to be honest with you about some of the forces that we face, and I'm interested in knowing your willingness to think about them too, because I don't have the answers to all of those. Yes.
I don't know that I even have a question, but I want to address something that Jason Grant, I'm a French and Francophone Studies master's student, as well as social theory. I don't know that I even have a question. I just want to address something that offended us in the other room, and I kind of wish you'd been able to hear the noises that were made. I went here undergrad. I did English and linguistics. I'm a product of the STEM program at Dunbar that Dr. Hipsley mentioned earlier. I was a Gaines Fellow, and I turned down offers at Brown and NYU to stay here for another 2 years to do this program. And I don't say that to brag. I say that to point out the fact that there are reasons to stay here. And I stayed here specifically for the research. There are people in the French program who are doing incredible research and that I wanted to stay around. There are people in the linguistics program. There are people in the English program. I'd also want to point out that there are 10 of us in the program, and we teach about 100 credit hours a semester. I'm being asked to teach 27 students a class, despite the fact that there's research that says that language instruction is useless over 17 students. I have an extra 10 students that are making it impossible for me to teach language. That said, I do it because I'm interested in them learning French. I'm interested in the value that French adds to it. I'm interested in them knowing that there's research involved in French studies. So I do it because I like doing it. They are not sources of budget for me. They're people who can learn French and can use French. I am not just their instructor. That's not the only reason I'm here. I'm here because I want to be involved with research. It's the reason I came here for undergrad. It's the reason I stayed here for graduate. So again, I don't have a question, but what you said earlier was that the reason we can't consider cutting salaries at the higher levels, higher earning people, is because they came to UK expecting a certain environment and on a certain, let's call it, contract. I came to UK on a certain contract expecting a certain environment. There's absolutely no difference. I came here instead of taking a position at Brown, instead of taking a position at NYU, because there was an environment that was promised to me here. And I think that that should be respected as much as those people who are making more than the like $4 an hour that I make.
I appreciate what you said. I respect what you say. I will have to be honest with you, too. Simply reducing administrative pay is not going to solve the magnitude of what we face here today. It's not. Okay? Well, you know, I'll work to preserve that promise that was made to you under all the, you know, different circumstances at the time. That was also $30 million ago, $50 million ago. That pains me. That pains me that today that, you know, when we step forward with our tax dollars, we're not the highest priority. But my responsibility is to be your strong advocate for just the things you articulated. But if there are not resources there, to look for ways to grow those resources to make sure you can do what you just described. That's what I'm committed to doing. Yes, sir.
My name is Lazarus Eze. I'm a graduate student in College of Public Health and the president of Student Public Health Association. I've listened to the discussions, and what was going through my mind, the argument that graduate students have undergrads that they teach, and to optimize the quality of undergraduate education, you need to keep the teaching assistants. But in my own College of Public Health, we don't have undergraduates that will teach, but we have masters and doctorate students. So I'm more afraid of the future of the College of Public Health because I feel we might be worse hit by the budget cuts and the policies. Funding for research in public health generally in the States has also dropped. Infrastructurally, our college doesn't have one of the best in the university. Our college is just 12 years old. So board has made incredible progress in the last few years. But as someone who is in my second year master's and considering a doctorate program, I'm not very much encouraged to want to stay in UK to do it. So are there any assurance that people in College of Public Health could get, or since infrastructure is one of the priorities of the present administration, could we get benefit of having a new building that could accommodate all our faculty and we have a more comfortable infrastructure in our college? Thank you.
You know, I'd certainly like to overcome overnight the facilities question that you raised. The reason I proposed that we consider funding debt to take on that responsibility is that's what many universities have done. And it's something that we've got to seriously consider if we're going to overcome the building conditions that you described. And I certainly know. I served as a dean of a school of public health for 7 years. They're very challenging colleges. They usually have low enrollments of graduate students. All right? They have great research enterprises. But to really thrive, they have to exist on funded effort of 60, 70%. It puts people on a treadmill, okay, of sort of grant funding. But those kinds of sort of successes do help address some of the things that you have described. Every college here has a little different set of circumstances. That's why working with the dean and working on models that fully empower those colleges to deal with what they face is what we'd like to do in the long term. We'll get to you.
Hello, my name is Frank Apia, and I am a senator from graduate school. I really appreciate you for coming and answering our questions. I really understand where you're coming from. I know the difficulties that we face because you have actually done a good job kind of putting them on the PowerPoint and giving us an opportunity to actually see them and understand them. I think we all do. I appreciate that fact. But I would also really appreciate if you could have done the same thing with the details in the budget cuts. You know, put them down point by point. These are the areas we are looking at. These are the kind of things that we intend to cut. And this is how it's going to affect graduate school or, you know, faculty or anything of that sort. I think that will cut down your job a little more. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Matt Giancarlo. I'm Director of Undergraduate Studies and Associate Chair in English. I'd like to ask you for a number, and if you don't have it now, maybe for the assurance that you might be able to provide it in the future. This last summer, I went to a major yearly conference that's held at Western Michigan University, and at a plenary session that was presided over and introduced by, I believe it was the provost, he made a remarkable boast, or a remarkable claim, that Western Michigan University had a percentage of, shall we say, overhead or administrative cost that was the lowest in his state, and it was among the top 10 lowest in the nation. And I was struck by that observation and claim because it seemed like he had that information ready at hand to say what percentage the administration cost the university. And I'm wondering if you have that number, and if we don't have that number but other universities do, if we could use a number like that to compare how our university ranks next to our benchmarks to see either alternately how expensive or how cost effective our administration is. And if we don't have that number, might we have it as a part of the transparency from your administration going forward?
So I'm not sure where he got his benchmarks or where he got national data, but what people frequently turn to are the OPEDS data. All right, and there have been different groups. The Goldwater Institute was one, and others who have done analysis of the growth of administrative overhead and those kinds of things. I think the last one that I think it was the Goldwater group did, indicated that the University of Kentucky had quite managed its overhead expenses. Is that right, Ann? And then there's a Delta cost study. We're happy to look at those kinds of things. One of the difficulties you have, having great familiarity with those kinds of data, or decent familiarity with them, is, you know, Western Michigan is different than a place with an academic medical center and a college of agriculture and a county extension service that stretches over 120 counties. And it's very difficult to make certain sort of comparisons, but we'll go look at it. Okay? Yes?
Group coming in here at 6 o'clock.
That's not the group with the rope and the pitchfork, is it?
No.
Okay.
Would you like to request a motion to adjourn? Or?
Well, Lee, you know, you tell me if that's what I'm supposed to do. I'm turning to you. Is that
Well,
what's protocol here?
Let me first of all thank you very much on behalf of the Senate and the Senate Council for coming and meeting with us. And I do think that this.
Thank you. And let me thank you. Thank you very much.
And I think this is a conversation that we definitely want to continue.